Some things don't chase you. They don't scream. They don't break in. They just wait, still, watching. Tonight's stories are not about haunted houses or demons. They're about something far more terrifying. People who stand too still. People who smile too wide. People who aren't quite people. You'll hear 4 true encounters. A man under a streetlight in Fort Myers, whose smile wasn't human. A figure hiding in the back seat of a car just waiting for the right red light. A woman who crawled toward a keyhole from inside an abandoned psychiatric ward. And a second walk to the canal that proved some terrors return, and this time they get closer. These aren't ghost stories. They're warnings. Of the moment your instinct says run, and you don't. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't wave back. Story 1. The figure under the streetlight. A terrifying encounter in Fort Myers. Every winter break, my family would pack up and drive south to visit my aunt and uncle in Fort Myers, Florida. They lived in a quiet residential neighborhood, the kind lined with palm trees and porch lights, and it became a tradition I looked forward to. I was 12 then, and my cousin Ashley, 13, was my partner in crime on these trips. We were inseparable, climbing trees, sneaking candy, and telling ghost stories well into the night. One night during that trip, after a warm dinner and some holiday wine for the adults, Ashley leaned in and whispered that she'd overheard a neighbor talking about a huge 10-foot alligator spotted in the nearby canal. Her eyes lit up with mischief. "We should go see if it's real," she said. I hesitated. It was past 10 p.m., and our parents would never allow it. But curiosity and maybe a bit of adolescent recklessness got the better of us. We snuck out through the back door using a flashlight app on Ashley's phone to navigate the dim, sticky Florida night. The streets were dead quiet, eerily so. The chirping of insects, the occasional croak of frogs, and the sound of our flip-flops on the pavement were the only things keeping the silence at bay. The canal was just a few blocks away, and we giggled nervously as we walked, imagining what we'd do if we actually saw the gator. But something shifted the moment we turned onto the last street. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. That's when we saw him. At the end of the block, beneath a flickering streetlight, stood a man. He was tall and thin, dressed in dark clothing. He didn't move. He didn't pace or look around or check his phone. He just stood there, completely still, with his face partially shadowed, staring directly ahead. I squeezed Ashley's arm. "Do you see him?" I whispered. She nodded, not saying a word. Then, as if he heard us, the man turned toward us. But it wasn't a normal turn. He twisted his whole body at once, like something out of a horror movie. His head followed a second later, and then he waved. Not a friendly wave, not a casual hello, but a slow, almost robotic gesture that made my stomach turn. We froze. For a second I thought maybe he needed help, but Ashley tugged my hand sharply. "Let's go. Now." We turned and began walking back the way we came, trying not to run, trying not to look like we were scared. But we could feel him watching us. Every step we took, his presence pressed on us like a weight. When we turned the corner, I glanced back. He was gone. The streetlight was still flickering, but the sidewalk beneath it was empty. Our walk became a jog. And then we heard it. Footsteps. Fast. Getting closer. We broke into a sprint, cutting through a neighbor's yard, jumping over a short wooden fence into the next lot. My heart was hammering, and Ashley's breathing was ragged beside me. We ducked behind a row of hedges and crouched, trying to silence our panicked gasps. For a few moments there was nothing. No footsteps. No voice. Just the wind rustling through the leaves. Then we saw movement. A shadow passed along the street behind us too fast for someone just walking. We stayed frozen in that hedge for what felt like 10 full minutes before finally gathering the courage to peek out. Nothing. We made our way home as quickly and quietly as possible. When we got back, the back door was still unlocked, the lights still dim, and our parents still laughing in the kitchen. They never even noticed we were gone. Ashley and I never told them what happened, but the next night we stayed inside. And every year since, whenever we return to Fort Myers, we make sure to lock the doors early. Because sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts or monsters, they're people. People who stand too still under streetlights. People who don't blink. People who wait. And to this day, I've never forgotten that man's smile. Small, tight-lipped, and completely, utterly wrong. Story 2. The haunted cars in the snow. The man in the back seat. It was Christmas Eve, and I was working a closing shift at a convenience store just off the main highway in northern Michigan. It had been snowing steadily all night, the kind of snowfall that makes the world feel quiet, like it's wrapped in a soft white blanket. Everything was muted, peaceful, but also unnervingly still. By the time I locked up and headed home, the roads were practically deserted. Not a single soul on the stretch of back road I took to avoid holiday traffic. The trees lining the road were heavy with snow, their branches sagging like they'd grown tired of the season. My breath fogged up the windshield as I drove, low beams piercing the thick flurries ahead. Then I saw it, 2 cars parked awkwardly on the side of the road near a blinking traffic light. One behind the other, hazard lights on. Both looked abandoned. I slowed down. No one inside either vehicle. Just empty cabins. No movement. No footprints around them, which was odd considering how fresh the snow was. And the windows all fogged up from the inside, like someone had recently been breathing in them. I pulled up beside the first car and rolled my window down, shouting a casual, "Hello, everything okay?" Silence. I tapped the horn lightly once, then twice. Still nothing. Then I noticed a man, standing just behind the second car facing the woods. He wasn't dressed for the weather, just a dark hoodie and jeans. His head was tilted at a strange angle, like he was listening for something in the trees. I called out to him, "Hey man, you all right?" He didn't move, didn't even flinch. I blinked, and he was gone. I swear to God, 1 second he was there, next, just vanished. I got out of my car, heart already starting to pound. I looked around both vehicles. Still no one. No sign of movement. I started to feel like I was being watched. Then a pair of headlights appeared behind me. A police cruiser. The officer got out and I explained what I'd seen: the 2 cars, the man, the sudden disappearance. He seemed skeptical, but concerned. He asked me to sit in my car while he checked things out. I nodded and got back into the driver's seat. That's when it happened. The officer froze, mid-step, eyes fixed on my back seat. He reached for his flashlight slowly. Then he shouted, "Get out of the car." Now I jumped out, panicked. "What? What's wrong?" He opened the rear door, and there he was, the same man, curled up on the floor of my back seat, silent, staring up at the roof with wide, glassy eyes. His mouth was slightly open, like he'd been mouthing something the whole time. I stumbled backward, breath caught in my throat. I hadn't heard anything. No door open, no shifting weight. Nothing. The officer pulled the guy out and cuffed him. He didn't resist. Didn't even speak. Didn't have an ID either. Wouldn't say a word. When they searched the 2 abandoned cars, they found both had been stolen. Plates swapped, fingerprints wiped. But this guy, he didn't show up in any database. No criminal history, no address, no name. Just there, like he came from nowhere and vanished the same way. I still drive that road sometimes, but every Christmas Eve since I triple-check my doors, I keep the back seat empty, and I never ever stop for a stranded car again. Because the people you think are in trouble might already be in your back seat. Story 3. The Ghost in the Abandoned Hospital. When I was 16, boredom had a way of making you do stupid things. My best friend Jose and I had heard countless rumors over the years about an abandoned hospital just a few miles from town, a place supposedly filled with the lingering presence of the dead. Most people avoided it. Some even claimed to hear screams coming from within its decaying walls at night. We laughed it off, called it nonsense. But deep down, I think both of us wanted to know the truth. One humid Saturday night in July, long after our parents had gone to sleep, we made our move. I grabbed my flashlight, slipped out the back door, and met Jose at the end of my street. Our bikes creaked under the stillness of the air as we pedaled into the darkness. The town felt asleep, almost too asleep. The hospital had been shuttered for nearly a decade after a fire damaged part of the West Wing. Since then, it had been the backdrop of a dozen urban legends nurses seen peeking out through blackened windows, phantom footsteps echoing in the halls, whispers when no one else was near. We didn't believe any of it. Or at least we told ourselves we didn't. We ditched our bikes behind a bush near the back fence. A broken window in the basement was our entry point, just like the online forums had said. Slipping through the shattered glass and into the stale air of the basement, we were instantly swallowed by darkness thicker than anything I'd ever experienced. My flashlight beam cut through it like a knife, but barely. The air smelled of rot mildew and something faintly metallic like dried blood. The walls were peeling, their pale green paint curling off like dead skin. The silence was deafening except for the occasional creak from somewhere deep inside. We explored in silence, speaking only in whispers, though we didn't know why. There was something oppressive in that place, something that made every instinct scream to leave, even as curiosity pushed us forward. After almost half an hour of exploring decaying hallways and rusted equipment rooms, we found a hallway that looked less damaged. One door stood out. It was perfectly closed, unlike the others that were ajar or unhinged. On the door was a faded sign, "Psychiatric Observation. Restricted." Jose reached for the knob, but I stopped him. "Listen," I whispered. From behind the door came a sound, thump, thump, thump. A rhythmic pounding, almost like someone rocking back and forth or knocking their head against the wall. It wasn't loud, but in the silence, it felt deafening. We stared at each other. Every logical part of me wanted to leave. But against better judgment, I bent down and looked through a small hole in the door where the wood had rotted through. At first, I saw nothing. Then slowly, from the corner of the room, a figure emerged. A woman. She wore a tattered hospital gown, her hair matted and falling over her face. Her movements were unnatural, jerky, like a puppet with broken strings. She stumbled toward the door, her head tilting side to side. Then she stopped. Her eyes locked with mine. I froze. A grotesque smile spread across her face, so wide, so forced it looked like her skin might tear. Then she dropped to her knees, crawling directly toward the hole. I screamed and fell backward, scrambling away. Jose didn't wait. He turned and ran. I followed, heart-pounding, breath ragged. We didn't look back. Not once. We bolted through the basement, out the shattered window, back to our bikes, and didn't stop pedaling until we were home. That night, I locked every door and window in my house. The next day, I tried to convince myself it was just someone squatting there, maybe mentally unstable, maybe just messing with us. But there was one thing I couldn't explain. When we went back 2 weeks later during the day, the door to that room was wide open. We peeked inside. It was empty, but scratched into the floorboards deep and chaotic was one word: hello. We never went back. Some places carry echoes of the past. Others carry something that's still there, waiting for someone to look through the keyhole. Story 4. A night of hiding in Fort Myers. The second encounter. Every year right after Thanksgiving, my family would escape the cold by visiting my aunt and uncle in Fort Myers, Florida. It was a warm, familiar tradition, something that made winter feel less harsh. I was 12 at the time, and my cousin Ashley was 13. We were close in age, inseparable on these trips, and always looking for a bit of adventure. That year, however, we got more than we bargained for. Ashley had heard tales passed around by local kids about a massive 10-foot alligator that had been spotted near a canal just a few blocks away. It sounded too good to be true, but we were young and curious. That curiosity would soon spiral into something neither of us could explain. Late one night, while the adults lingered in the kitchen drinking wine and reminiscing, Ashley nudged me and whispered, "Let's go see if the gator's real. Just a quick walk to the canal and back." We both knew we weren't supposed to be out that late, especially in an unfamiliar neighborhood. But something about the humid, quiet night made it feel like a harmless adventure. We slipped out the back door using our phones as flashlights. The streets were dark and oddly silent. Even the insects seemed quieter than usual. We made our way down the block past the local convenience store and toward the canal. The trees hung heavy with moss, casting thick shadows across the pavement. It was like walking through a tunnel made of leaves and darkness. We reached the edge of the canal and waited, half hoping and half dreading that we'd see the gator. Instead, what we saw was something far stranger. Standing under a flickering streetlight just across the canal was a man. At least we thought it was a man. He was tall, painfully thin, wearing a stained gray hoodie and jeans that seemed soaked from the knees down. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there. "What the hell?" Ashley whispered. We froze. My heart thudded in my chest. It wasn't just his stillness that scared me, it was the fact that he was looking directly at us. Not around. Not through. At us. And even from across the canal, I could feel something was wrong. His eyes weren't just watching. They were scanning, almost calculating. Then he did something that made my skin crawl. He raised his hand slowly and waved. But it wasn't a friendly wave. It was robotic. Deliberate. Like someone pretending to mimic human behavior. Ashley grabbed my arm. "Let's go," she said. "Now." We turned to walk away, trying not to seem scared. But when we glanced back, he was gone. Completely vanished. The next moment was a blur of terror. A twig snapped behind us. We spun around our flashlights, flailing, and there he was, just 20 feet behind us, standing in the middle of the street. We screamed and bolted. We didn't care about being quiet anymore. We ran across someone's lawn, cut through hedges, and didn't stop until we saw the warm lights of our aunt and uncle's house. We stumbled in, out of breath, shaken. Nobody believed us, of course. The adults dismissed it as overactive imaginations and spooky stories gone too far. But Ashley and I both knew what we saw. That wasn't just a man. Or if it was someone with intentions no child should ever have to encounter. The next day, just out of curiosity, we went back to the canal. Broad daylight, clear skies. Nothing seemed out of place until Ashley pointed at something on the ground just beneath the streetlight. A shoe. A single mud-caked sneaker torn at the sole and half buried in the weeds. We never told anyone about it. We didn't want to give our parents another reason to keep us locked inside. But from that moment on, we never snuck out again. Especially not at night. Especially not near the canal. Because sometimes, it's not the gators you should be afraid of. It's the people. Or worse, the things. pretending to be people? What if you hadn't looked through the keyhole? What if you hadn't stopped for the empty cars? What if you hadn't walked back to the canal the next day? 4 stories. 4 chances to turn around. 4 moments where someone was watching, just waiting for the hesitation. The man beneath the streetlight didn't move until you stared too long. The stranger didn't enter your life. You invited him in by leaving the back door open. The eyes in the hallway. They didn't blink. Because they weren't afraid. You were. And now you understand. Not every figure disappears when you close your eyes. Some stay, in memory, in shadows, in that brief moment when you think you're alone. So the next time you find yourself in the quiet on a snowy road or near a flickering light or behind the door of some place you shouldn't be, listen, look, and then leave. Because sometimes it's not what you hear that should scare you. It's the silence that follows, and the feeling that someone or something is still there, waiting.